We'll give people a few more minutes to join the meeting and then we'll open it up.
Hey, Kathy, I need to
Yes.
check out probably about 2:30 to run to a doctor's appointment real quick. And then as soon as I get back, I'll come back on. But
Great.
I will be
Try and
coming and going. How's that?
okay. Okay, no problem. Thank you for letting me know. And
Thank you.
we may hold a couple of questions for you if they come up while you're gone. Abby, it looks like there are some folks that are in the that need to be elevated into the meeting or panelists. In the general attendees section. Well, good afternoon. I'd like to call the September 17th meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission to order. Appreciate those of you on the commission and the public for joining us today. I also want to thank folks that provided public comments in advance of the meeting. I wanted to note that Oregon Department of Forestry provided a notice about an urban and community forest grant program opportunity. That was part of the public comments. And then we also received a number of comments encouraging the commission to discuss a range of carbon removal and sequestration strategies. so that we could consider going beyond reducing emissions but also looking at actively removing emissions from the atmosphere through a wide range of strategies. So we can look at adding this topic to a future agenda item. State Forester Mukomoto will be joining us a little late today. He and Danny Norlander, who's on now, will be making a brief update presentation when the State Forester is able to join, and they may have a few words about the urban and community forest grant opportunity as well, so we can hear from them. If you could, Abby, just remind folks of how to use WebEx, and perhaps remind folks of, in particular, about how we hope they will let us know that they want to provide public comments today.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are new to using WebEx, or even if you join us a lot, WebEx can be a little bit different than other platforms. Down in the bottom left corner, kind of towards the middle, you should have a mute, unmute button, as well as a start video button if you're one of our commissioners or on the one of our panelists. So you can always start your video. Down at the bottom, there should be either this little emoji, this little face, or kind of like a little hand that you can click to raise your hand if you do have a comment that you'd like to provide. And if you are joining us as an attendee, a member of the public, you can always raise your hand as well when we get around to public comment. If you have things that you want to say but don't necessarily want to speak, you can always add those into the chat. We will be monitoring that as well. And then if you are joining us by phone, you can dial *3 to raise your hand.
Great, thank you, Abby. Let's go to the next slide. Actually, before we jump into the agenda, are there updates that commissioners or staff to the agencies would like to make at this time? Alan, I think you're on. Would you mind giving us an update about the staff recruitment?
Sure. Yes, there's 5 people that are going to be on the climate team. It's led up by Amy Schlisser, and we've got Jeff Crook, who's been hired as the senior policy climate expert. And then we are in recruitment. In fact, interviewing today, tomorrow, and Thursday for the policy analyst for natural working lands, as well as the research associates for natural working lands and for climate action. And we do not have a dearth of applicants. We had 270 people apply for the research associate 3's positions, for the 2 of them, for climate and for natural working lands. So we're winnowing that down to a group of that we've interviewed, and then we're gonna select someone probably this week and make an offer. So we'll keep you posted on the progress on all 3 of those positions within the next couple of weeks.
That's great.
And then we'll have our full team on board, and Amy will have a team to lead.
That's great, Alan. Thank you so much. It's exciting to hear about the progress. Any other updates from agency directors or commissioners?
Chair McDonald, this is Sarah O'Brien from OWEB. I've got a
Yes.
quick one if you're interested.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome,
I
Sarah.
just wanted to share my colleague Alexa Schmidt that we introduced last time is kind of continuing on with her work plan in implementing OWEB funding dedicated to the natural and working lands funds. We have a survey out and are getting good responses from partners on who would be interested.
Sarah, you just froze up.
On specific also out and about connecting. Oh, am I frozen?
You unfroze.
Lex is out meeting with folks too.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Appreciate it. Any other updates or announcements? Hey, we did modify the agenda. We've got a few folks that aren't able to join us today and some changes in terms of the climate program overviews from the agencies. We also thought it would maybe be beneficial to move the public comment period to the end of the meeting so that the folks that are here and might want to provide comments are also able to provide some comments on some of the discussion that we have regarding the recommendations for the biennial report. So that is a second change. If for some reason you wanted to make public comment and you won't be able to stay with us through the full meeting, you can let Abby know and we can try and fit you in earlier during the meeting. So do let Abby know if you know what your time horizon looks like, and we'll do our best to fit you in. So our main focus today is associated with the recommendations that we'll make as part of the biennial report. And to help inform that and also to follow up on our meeting in August, David Allaway is going to join us, or has joined us, and will be presenting the final information that they submitted to the legislature and have posted on the consumption-based inventory and recommendations that they have developed. So that'll be very helpful. And then we'll dive right into the recommendations and go from there. Thank you. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And I'll turn things over to David. Welcome, David. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Chair McDonald. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you for your invitation to provide an update on DEQ's report to the legislature on opportunities to reduce consumption-based emissions. For the record, my name is David Allaway, and I'm a senior policy analyst at the Oregon DEQ. At your meeting last month, DEQ shared some preliminary content from what were draft reports, and we asked for this commission's feedback on 3 draft recommendations. We've since made some revisions and finalized and submitted that report just last week to the legislature. Next slide, please. To be clear, there are 3 reports. The first is the actual report to the legislature, and then there are 2 companion technical documents, an update to the state's consumption-based inventory, and a technical report on opportunities to reduce consumption-based emissions. All 3 reports can be downloaded from the page shown on this slide. Next slide, please. Just a quick refresher. Last month, we shared with you that Oregon's consumption-based emissions are very large. The consumption-based inventory places an additional 59 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent on the table in 2021. That's almost as large as the sector-based inventory in its entirety. Next slide, please. The growth in consumption-based emissions in blue has far exceeded reductions in sector-based emissions shown in green. Of course, the sector-based inventory is how the Commission has historically measured progress against the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals, but that green line by itself presents an incomplete and potentially misleading picture of how Oregon is contributing to emissions and, by extension, opportunities here in Oregon to reduce those emissions. Next slide, please. Most of the growth in Oregon's consumption-based emissions over the last 16 years is associated with consumption of materials, such as food and materials used in construction. In contrast, emissions associated with direct consumption of fuels and electricity have trended downwards, despite growth in population and economic activity. And the state's policy response to climate mitigation has largely focused on fuel and electricity, with much less response focused on materials, and that is evidenced by the trend lines here in the data. Next slide, please. We also shared that our research discovered significant opportunity to reduce emissions through new policies. Projection of emissions is shown in this graph, with the large purple wedge showing how existing policies and a renewal of the Climate Protection Program could reduce those emissions. The blue and green wedges below show the added potential of additional policies identified in our report. So in short, our research found that Oregon's historic and current response to climate change, having been informed primarily by the sector-based inventory, is unbalanced and incomplete. There are many additional opportunities to take actions here in Oregon to reduce emissions. And while some of those emissions do not physically originate within Oregon's borders, at the end of the day, that shouldn't matter. Once emitted, greenhouse gases do not respect state borders. What does matter is whether we can take actions here in Oregon to reduce those emissions. And in that spirit, the new reports identify and uncover a large number of potential actions and demonstrate potential benefits for Oregon residents, communities, and businesses from those additional policies. Next slide, please. DEQ provided 3 recommendations in our report to the legislature, and they are: first, that the state should adopt a goal to reduce consumption-based emissions. Second, that DEQ should update the inventory on a more regular and frequent basis. And last, that the state should take more action to reduce these emissions. And on this slide, we list some important considerations for selecting potential action policy. Next slide, please. So this is a very quick recap from August. And today I would like to introduce you to one of the companion documents, which is a rich repository of ideas and analysis that could inform policy development in the state for many years to come. The Stockholm Environment Institute's technical report is actually a compilation of 4 distinct tracks of work shown on this slide. And because you've already seen pieces of the emissions forecast and wedge analysis back in August, today I'm going to introduce the other 3 elements of this report. Next slide, please. The evaluation of options is organized around outcomes, and each outcome has a variety of policy and program options that could help to realize that outcome. This slide shows a list of 13 outcomes that were evaluated in detail and a reference to some additional outcomes that received a lighter evaluation. Next slide, please. Of course, outcomes typically don't just happen by themselves, and so the report identifies a variety of policy options that the legislature might consider to achieve these outcomes. There are 9 broad classes of policies, as shown in orange, but not every option is a good fit for every outcome. So the report provides several examples of policies that might accomplish each outcome. Generally speaking, it's more effective to combine several complementary policies together into a more comprehensive strategy. So, for example, reducing the wasting of food might involve some combination of outreach, education, product standards, financial incentives, and changes in government operations. Next slide, please. For each outcome and the types of policies most likely to be considered, SEI then provides an evaluation that considers greenhouse gas reduction potential, likelihood and durability of impact, ease of implementation, and a variety of economic, social, and environmental criteria shown in green. You can imagine that this is like a matrix of sorts, and over the course of 120 or so pages, each of these outcomes on the left is defined, different policies that might achieve it in the middle are highlighted, and then those are assessed using the framework shown on the right-hand side of the slide. So there's a lot of content that policymakers could turn to as they explore each of these outcomes. For example, what might be some social equity considerations, and how might potential negative impacts on disadvantaged populations be mitigated? So just to provide a flavor of this analysis, let's take a deeper dive into just one of these outcomes by way of an example. Next slide, please. And today's example from the emissions forecast and the detailed wedge analysis, if you can read the small print, you can see that reducing embodied carbon emissions in new construction, the blue colored wedge, has some significant emissions reduction potential. Construction is the single largest category of consumption-based emissions from government, and that's largely due to spending on infrastructure. Among household and business consumption, embodied carbon from buildings are also a significant source of emissions. And in both cases, infrastructure and buildings, most of these emissions are associated with the production of materials, concrete, steel, aluminum, carpet, roofing, and etc. Next slide, please. A number of governments are already taking steps to tackle what we call embodied carbon in construction. For example, DEQ worked with the Oregon Concrete and Aggregate Producers Association to provide technical resources and financial incentives that resulted in more than 1,000 different Oregon concrete mixes receiving a third-party verified, published Environmental Product Declaration, or EPD. Think of it as akin to a carbon label, which then allows purchasers to give preference for lower carbon concrete mixes. Building on that idea, in July of this year, EPA awarded a $3.5 million grant to the International Code Council, Oregon DEQ, and the Washington Department of Commerce, which we will use to provide financial and technical assistance to help approximately 200 additional manufacturers of concrete, asphalt, steel, wood, and other construction products to produce more of these EPDs. And the value, again, of this is not only the public-facing value, but the fact that when producers evaluate and disclose environmental impacts, they are much more likely to reduce those impacts. This is becoming easier, and EPDs are becoming more comparable as the federal government is producing guidelines and standards for these EPDs. Moving to more regulatory approaches, the City of Portland now requires concrete used in public procurement to have a carbon footprint below a set benchmark. Marin County in California has applied that idea to all concrete uses everywhere in the county, both public and private projects. And moving from individual materials to whole buildings, California has new embodied carbon requirements that just went into effect on July 1st. Next slide, please. Those requirements apply to larger non-residential buildings, and the state provides for 3 compliance pathways: either reuse of an existing building, or conducting a whole building life cycle assessment and achieving a carbon footprint below a baseline, or using products with EPDs that have global warming impacts below a threshold. And I'll note that the Oregon Building Codes Division has a report due to the legislature later this year, and their contractor is also looking at the Cal Green model for potential applicability here in Oregon. Next slide, please. So these are just a few examples of some policies that already exist. SEI's report draws on those and the literature to produce a longer list of potential policy options for Oregon. I won't read them all here in the interest of time. This is just to give you a sense of the level of detail and information available in the companion report. Next slide, please. I couldn't fit them all on one slide, so here are some additional policy ideas identified by SEI just for this one outcome about reducing embodied carbon. Next slide, please. SEI's report then evaluates those policy options that might be combined to help achieve the outcome of decarbonization. For example, it cites several case studies suggesting that substantial reductions in embodied carbon in building construction, up to 46% reductions, could be achieved for a cost premium of less than 1%. Next slide, please. And this shows even more evaluation content that you can review at your leisure. Again, this is just one example of the 13 potential outcomes included in SEI's report. So there's a lot there. Next slide. The report also includes a limited marginal abatement cost curve inspired by TIGR, but to our knowledge, this was the first effort in the world to generate a marginal abatement cost curve for consumption-based policies. This is a very young field, and there's not as much empirical data to draw from. SEI also had a very small budget for this task, so what they created was a preliminary and limited analysis, one that looked at only 6 outcomes. But 4 of those 6 outcomes came out as having negative net costs, that is, financial benefits to society, and those involved smaller new home sizes, reduced grocery, restaurant, and government food waste, and reduced consumption of meat. 2 measures involving embodied carbon in construction have positive costs, but still potentially below the social cost of carbon, depending on how one defines it and the choice of the discount rate. But this is important because in a world of limited resources, it suggests that we can accomplish more emissions reduction per dollar spent if we expand our portfolio of projects and policies to include consumption-based emissions. Next slide, please. Finally, SEI produced 2 discussion papers. The first addresses consumption-based emissions goals. DEQ has recommended that the state adopt a goal to reduce consumption-based emissions, and there's a variety of benefits of this spelled out in the report. Perhaps the most important is that having a goal motivates and empowers actions to reduce emissions. But this begs the question, what could such a goal look like? Next slide, please. SEI's discussion paper explores that question. It provides case studies of other communities that have adopted consumption-based goals and provides 4 different frameworks by which a goal could be established. For example, the state could simply take the existing statutory goal from House Bill 3543 and apply it to consumption-based emissions. Indeed, that's what the Commission did many years ago when it chose to use the sector-based inventory to track progress against the state's goal. Sector-based inventory already includes some consumption-based emissions associated with electricity, so there's a precedent for this. Taking the existing goals and extending them to consumption-based emissions is definitely an option. There are 3 other approaches identified in the paper. I'll elaborate on the last option, which involves downscaling a global carbon budget. Next slide.
David, can I just, Director Colbert, would you like to ask a question now, or?
I didn't hear when we started if it was okay to ask questions as we went along or if you wanted us to wait. So apologies.
I would, no worries. I'd say go ahead. And then David, you can say your preference after that.
Hey, David, thanks. Sorry to interrupt you, but you know, in the last one where you were showing the California stuff and you had the smaller size house for new builds, it was the slide before this.
Perhaps we could go back a couple slides to California.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
Maybe a couple more.
I think smaller new home. Oh, okay.
Keep
That was
going.
it. I just want to make sure I understand that the next one. Okay. It was the one where you had the graph showing the kind of the cost benefit of different actions.
I'm sorry. Thank you. If staff could please advance the slides 2 forward.
Apologies,
And 2
everyone.
more.
No, this is great.
Thank you.
Okay.
This
So
one.
I just want to make sure I understand this graph. So according to their cost curve work, am I understanding that the biggest return on investment is smaller new home size based on this data?
So Commissioner Colbert, thank you. Of the 6 options that SEI was able to quantify, and there are many options which they were not able to quantify, but based on the limited budget and the limited empirical data available to them, this was the measure that appeared to generate the greatest cost reduction to society writ large relative to the cost of implementation. And this one's pretty easy to understand. Smaller houses cost less, and they generate savings to people who buy them relative to the larger houses, which are generally what's being built today. There is a economic rebound effect where consumers who have the discretionary income to afford a larger house save money on the smaller house, and then they use those savings in other emissions intensive ways, and that rebound effect was included in this evaluation.
Okay, thank you, and apologies if I threw you off there with your slides. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question. So if we could now go forward 2 more slides. I was just introducing these 4 possible frameworks. Thank you. The 4th framework is to set per capita targets based on global carbon budgets. And in their report, SEI illustrates how one could take a global emissions budget aligned with limiting warming to 1.5 degrees C and divide it by global population. And if every person in the world had the same emissions budget, that could form the basis of a goal for Oregon. DEQ is not recommending one of these approaches over another, but we do think it would be helpful and empowering for the state to adopt a goal, signal intent, and empower action. Next slide, please. This graph here shows SEI's projection of emissions and how those emissions could change if the state implements all of its existing policies. and also achieves a variety of outcomes related to consumption-based emissions, such as reducing the wasting of food by 30 to 40% and reducing the size of newly constructed homes. And this diagram shows emissions on a per capita basis, and for reference, includes 2016 per capita consumption-based emissions for 5 other industrialized countries that have high standards of living. At the bottom of this graph are a couple of zones that might be the subject of emission goals. On the top, a target aligned with the current state goal, and on the bottom, a target aligned with a global carbon budget. The difference between forecasted emissions and these potential targets is what we call the emissions gap, and SEI's second discussion paper, also in the report, explores some additional policy options that could help to further close that gap. Next slide, please. This brings me to the end of my prepared comments. I hope it gives you a flavor of the very rich content in SEI's report. Shorter legislative report is largely a synthesis of this material. Hopefully this has piqued your interest because we do believe that this field of work is necessary if the state is going to make sustained progress at reducing emissions. We've uncovered a lot of untapped potential for emissions reduction and community benefits. All 3 reports were published just last week. They are available on DEQ's website. Chair McDonald, thank you again for the invitation. This concludes our update, and I'd be happy to take additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was a great report. And as David mentioned, the reports really just got posted last week, so there's certainly more that we as a commission hope to digest over the next month. David, I just wanted to confirm that you'll be able to stay with us through the rest of the meeting as we have some recommendations that are associated with the consumption-based inventory and the recommendations DEQ made. So if you are available, then we'll probably circle back to you during that discussion.
I will be here.
Great. And then you mentioned that the Building Codes Division has a report that is due to the legislature soon, and I didn't see anyone on from the Building Codes Division. If I'm wrong about that, feel free to jump in. But if you could just tell us if you know when that report is due and whether it will include recommendations in addition to any analysis that they might be providing.
Thank you. Chair McDonald, yes, the same legislation that required DEQ to prepare this report for the legislature also requires the Building Codes Division to submit a report to the legislature that identifies opportunities to reduce embodied carbon through changes in building codes or other policies. I don't recall off the top of my head whether the enabling legislation directs building codes to make recommendations or whether it's simply an option for them to do so. And while DEQ is advising Building Codes Division on that report, I don't feel it proper to speak on the division's behalf. So I'll leave your last question unanswered for the time being.
I appreciate that. We'll follow up with the Building Codes Division about that. Thank you. You mentioned one way that we could set a goal for emissions, and then I noticed I have just been able to skim the technical report, but there were a number of case studies identified, including Portland, and I think that Portland uses a per capita approach. Is that correct, or am I misremembering that?
Chair McDonald, I am checking right now. It looks to me like the city of Portland's goal was to reduce emissions in both their sector and consumption-based inventories 50% by 2030 and achieve net zero by 2050.
You're right. Now that you say that, I recall that. Well, that's great. It'll be interesting to find out how they're feeling about how they approach that. So thank you for the report. Any commissioners have any clarifying questions for David? Not seeing any. hands. David?
If I may, Chair McDonald, in response
Absolutely.
to your last comment, I'll just note that this fall, we will take the state's consumption-based emissions inventory and reprogram it to update the Multnomah County consumption-based inventory. And then we will be able to provide the city of Portland with an update on where their consumption-based emissions are. And perhaps after that time, they'll be in a better position to tell you how they feel about their progress. At present, they don't have new data because we haven't been able to provide it to them yet.
Great. Thank you, David. That's helpful to understand, and great that you offer that service to Multnomah County and the city of Portland.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move on to our next agenda item. And we had intended to have both Business Oregon and DAS provide an overview of their climate work. And unfortunately, the presenter from DAS is out sick. And there was a request from Business Oregon to delay to a future meeting this fall. Mark Brady is with us today, however, and would like to say a few words. So if you could go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll turn things to Mark.
Okay, thank you, Chair McDonald. I appreciate it. For the record, and if you can't hear me or if I sound funny, please interrupt me at any point.
You're great.
Good. Okay, so I'm Mark Brady. I'm with Business Oregon. I am our innovation and entrepreneurship manager here. So I manage the team that works on a variety of programs that are all essentially aimed at helping emerging small businesses in Oregon hopefully grow into the future employers of the state. And as Chair McDonald said, we had asked to postpone our official update for you all. And the reasoning for that is a couple of reasons. The biggest one being that the governor had a clean tech manufacturing task force that worked through the summer. And I know at least Commissioner Apter was, or at least her organization was involved with that. I'm not sure if you personally were, but if you were and you have anything to correct that I say here, please do, or to add. But the recommendations from that task force are still under consideration by the governor's office, and there's some discussion back and forth about what that might turn into in terms of legislation in the upcoming session. Because that information isn't able to be discussed publicly just yet, we asked to postpone our update until we could talk about that, because that effort and what will come out of that is really kind of the biggest thing we have going related to climate right now. So we thought it would be better to be able to give you a full update on that at a future meeting. So thank you for understanding, and thank you, Chair McDonald, for helping us facilitate that. And our director, Support Chiang, sends her regards and apologies for missing today. But in lieu of the full update, I thought I could give a little bit of an update on some recent activity from my team here. Again, the Innovation and Entrepreneurship team. We work at the very earliest stages of companies. So people have random ideas, or a university researcher, professor has something coming out of the lab that they think has a business opportunity. And we have a variety of programs to help push those efforts forward. Most of those efforts do not have a particular industry focus. We're a little more industry agnostic, but we do end up getting quite a bit of climate-related companies that come through our programs. And we are pulling together some numbers on companies we've supported in the last couple of biennia, and I thought I'd just kind of report out on that. This is all work that's generally done under the banner of the Oregon Innovation Council. For those who are not familiar with that, just real fast on that group. That is a group of high-level, smart people from inside government and private sector and the university system that advise us, the governor's office and the legislature, sort of like you all do on climate topics. This group advises us on how we focus our innovation investments into the best possible uses. And so we got a variety of programs that money goes into, and throughout the program, or across the programs, I should say, we have supported approximately 160 companies over the last, again, like 2.5 biennia, let's say. And of those 160, a little over 30 of them are climate-related companies. So about 20% of our portfolio, I would say, is climate-related companies. Now, again, these are really, really small and early stage companies. So the names probably wouldn't mean anything to 99% of you. There is one that you might have heard of, Energy Storage Solutions, or ESS, the flow battery company at Wilsonville. We supported them way back in 2017 with some early grant funding. Excuse my voice. But that just shows that these companies that we support generally take between 5 and 10 years to rise to the level of general public awareness. But we do again have about 20% in the climate realm, and of those 20%, the vast majority of them are in clean or renewable energy. So again, out of about 32, we got half of them are energy related. About a quarter of them are buildings or built environment type technologies. A lot of those are kind of building automation or building control systems. We have a handful in transportation, from both marine transportation and road transportation. And then we have a group of maybe 20% of them that are kind of honestly all over the place, in the sense of it's not easy to put them all in one category. As you all probably know, if you talk clean tech or climate tech, that the definition of that gets unwieldy very quickly or very broad. So we've got some that are air quality things, we've got some sequestered carbon things, we've got plastics recycling through enzymes, company like that. So kind of all over the place, but that gives you a sense of how many are in our world, our ecosystem. And I would say that, just so you know, the vast majority of the support we provide to these companies are grants. Either they're direct grants to help them with their technology development or their commercialization activities. That's a big push of ours, because they can get other funding from private sector or federal government to help on the technology side, but there's always gaps in those funds and the ability to engage with customers and really kind of build the business side of the business outside of the technology. So we try to focus our money on those gaps, things that hopefully again lead them ultimately to be a successful business and future employer of Oregonians. We do actually do a couple of investments programs. So we do have a few investments out there in climate related companies. We do those through a third party, because we're constitutionally not allowed to hold stock. But if we ever do get any returns from any of those investments, the intent is to plow the money right back into the programs. We're not looking to make money. When we do investments, we make them as company friendly as possible. And the thought is just that if there's a return that the private sector realizes on these companies making it big, why not have the state get a small sliver of that to further support these programs, so we don't always have to be begging the legislature for new money to support these efforts. So those would be my quick updates. Again, we'll be back. Support will be here to give you a real update, particularly focused on the Clean Tech Manufacturing Task Force and its recommendations and any legislation that might result from that. But we also, as an agency, just recently finished a new strategic plan and a DEI plan, and we're crafting the implementation framework around that right now. So we would also provide an update on that, especially as it's connected to climate-related work at the agency. So thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions. And I know that was very fast, but hopefully that was somewhat interesting.
Thank you, Mark. That was very interesting. And I believe Business Oregon may have supported a company, Indo Windows, that one of our past commissioners, Sam Pardue, is the head of. So thank you for supporting climate-friendly jobs in Oregon.
Yeah, that's a funny one, because I still remember. So I've only been the manager here for a year and 3/4, beginning of 23. I was a staff person on the team before that and working on some of these programs. And Sam reached out to me, and I was in his house one time when he was first starting out, and he was showing me one of his first models. And yeah, we got him connected. We didn't do a ton with him. We got him connected with other people that did help him. But yeah, that's a great success story for the efforts. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. Any questions for Mark? And again, we'll hear more at one of our next meetings. Thank you. I believe I saw State Forester Makamoto join. So if I am correct on that, I think there were a couple of updates that you and Danny wanted to provide.
Yeah, I think. Thank you, Catherine. I think you asked us to talk about the Climate Action Awards that we gave. Climate Smart, the 2024 Climate Smart Forestry Award recognition. And the Climate Smart Forestry Award was created as an incentive for promoting forest carbon reduction and capture practices and innovation as part of the 2021 ODF Climate Change and Carbon Plan, page 32. It was a great it was a great celebration, and we had some great. We had 3 awards given. One was for research and innovation. We awarded that to David and Mary Ann Bugney, excuse me, for employing holistic forest resilience strategies and increase carbon capture through longer rotations and reduce reliance of fossil fuels through forest stream regenerated energy. I was lucky. I got to actually visit their property. They're doing amazing things, not just in carbon, but they're doing a lot of stream restoration. And they actually do have a carbon, one part of their property, they have a little carbon storage, carbon offset area with the trees. And they're working with a group that sponsors that. But the whole family's involved. It's a beautiful tree. It's a beautiful patch of trees up there in Clackamas County. The second one was for landowner and land management recipient. The Nature Conservancy, Craig Benz, and the Klamath tribes were awarded for one using indigenous knowledge, such as fuels reduction strategies to reduce catastrophic wildfire and carbon emissions, and 2, measurably increasing forest carbon capture through silvicultural practices, and then improving forest health and enhancing resilience to climate change and catastrophic wildfire. And finally, collaboration with various university scientists to produce data on the efficacy of these strategies. And, you know, the Klamath tribe, and especially the Nature Conservancy too, are known for these resilience projects down there in that Klamath County area. And finally, there was an honorable mention to Peter Hayes and Dean Moberg for initiating conversations across multiple audiences regarding climate smart forestry strategies, which contribute to development of criteria used in this award. I got to participate on Peter Hayes's property up there near Forest Grove, and just a beautiful property. And he's done a lot of selective management and a great conversation. He organizes these tours of his property and has little work stops where he talk about carbon and forestry and so on. So great. Peters and David are great thinkers, and they push that ahead. Now, I talked to Danny Norlander, and he said he might have some videos. Danny, are you on?
He is.
Oh, there you are. Okay. He might have some videos. And so I thought, if we had those, can you cue those up and give the group a little bit of a overview, or were you planning to do that?
They're about 8 minutes apiece. So I put the
Oh, that's too long, probably. You want to show one? You want to show one? I think that Bugney one, or
I'll leave that up to Kathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could show one. I think
I like the Bugney one. I like them all, quite frankly, but I like the Bugney and the Klamath and the Nature Conservancy Klamath tribes. They're both quite interesting. So
let's see the Bugney one.
Whoever's driving,
I heard that they want to see the Bugney one.
All right, so that's the first link that I put in there. And I guess whoever's driving could start that. And while that's happening, or I could.
Did you have other updates you wanted to give?
I was just gonna remind people where the Climate Smart Forestry Award came from. And it was identified in our climate change and carbon plan that was approved in 2021. As one of the things that we'd like to do is one of the supporting actions to kind of recognize forest sector individuals and organizations that are really working on climate smart forestry, we'll be working to update that plan in the next year or two. And then I also put in a link to the page that has more information on the Climate Smart Forestry Award. And I just wanted to mention that nominations for the 2025 award will open in October. So if anyone is interested in doing that application form and process will be posted on that site. And then Kathy had mentioned the Urban and Community Forestry Subaward. And then I just posted a link in the chat to the page that talks about that. And those are grants that are $10,000 to $750,000 with no match required for urban and community forestry.
And those are
Um,
due,
Those are due October 15th.
Great.
So about a month from now. All the contact information is on there. Those are the All Entities Subaward Program. And if you have any questions, there is information, links there, presentations there, and then contact information there too.
great, thanks, Danny. Jeff, we are seeing an email from you rather than the video. And if it's too hard to show the video, then,
Well, I think we're getting it right there.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Looks like we might not have sound. Or at least I might not have sound.
I don't have sound either.
Okay, well then maybe we should just let people watch it themselves. But I'm looking forward to seeing it. It's a
Oh yeah,
great
this is
idea.
a great little video, and you kind of get the flavor of his management back there too. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
One of the things I did want to mention, and Danny, forgive me if Christine Buell, our entomologist, and then Josh Bernard, and who else worked on this? Jim Gershbach did the videos, and
It was a whole.
yeah, the whole team, and they very thoughtfully went through all this stuff and selected these 3 awards. So
Great.
The
Great team.
videos. So the videos are done internally by our public affairs staff, and we also do ones for the Operator of the Year awards, which recognize operators that are doing things that are environmentally sensitive and things like that.
Great.
okay, well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate hearing about that and the urban and community forest grant opportunity. That sounds like a great deal for communities who want to make some improvements in their canopy coverage in their cities and towns. So thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
go on to our next agenda item, which is to start to dig into the reports or the recommendations, excuse me. And just as a quick reminder, we have approved a report outline that includes kind of an overview of some of the importance of climate action, costs of inaction. We do a review of the Oregon sector-based greenhouse gas emission goals, as well as progress towards meeting those goals. This year we will include the consumption-based emissions information that DEQ just developed and we talked about earlier. There are going to be some updates in the body of the report that help readers understand the progress that's being made to implement the roadmap, as well as the natural and working lands proposal. And we also are going to include a section on advancing equitable climate solutions, as well as some information on climate adaptation and resilience efforts. The state agencies provided some information to DEQ about their climate work, and there'll be a short summary of that information. The full reports from the agencies were posted on our meeting site for today. And then the last piece, which is the piece that we'll be focusing on at this meeting and the next meeting, is really to dig into the recommendations that we'd like to make to in 2024. And those recommendations, just as a reminder, generally the report goes to the legislature and the governor's office, but our recommendations can include recommendations for businesses, individuals, as well as state agencies and others. So we can consider a broad range of recommendations, and then we'll provide some conclusions at the end of the report. Next slide, please. A little bit about the timeline and process. We impaneled a report committee or a recommendations committee of the commission, and we met twice between August 26th and September 6th. And the intent of this committee was just to help us start to frame the recommendations and to think about some of the information that should go into the recommendations. It certainly is not intended, the draft recommendations we'll be talking about today are not intended to be the last word from this committee or preclude any additional input from committee members about the recommendations. It was really just to get us started and to have something that the full commission could consider at this meeting. We will have a public comment period following this meeting. And it will go for the next 10 days through noon on the 27th. And we're really looking forward to getting comments from the public, from agencies, and from commissioners during that period of time. We will pull all of that information and look at creating an update of the recommendations for consideration at our October 15th meeting. And our intent is to adopt a set of recommendations at that meeting so that we are ready to put them into the report, which is due December 1st to the legislature. So that's kind of the timeline we're on in the process. Because the report, I think, Jeff, you told me that just the main body of the report, not including the recommendations, is already at 30 plus pages. And the staff has been doing a great job at pulling together the information for the main body of the report. We're really focusing the commission's time on getting the recommendations right, and then we'll marry up the two before we get that submitted. So with that, if maybe start with any questions from commissioners about the process and deadlines. Okay. Maybe one more comment and then we'll start diving into the discussion of the recommendations. As the kind of source documents for the recommendations, we went back to the roadmap that we adopted in the spring about a year and a half ago. The natural and working lands proposal that the commission adopted in 2021, and we considered the recommendations that we heard in August from DEQ about the consumption-based emissions. So those were the three sources that we went back to start to draft recommendations. Today, what I would like us to do is take a look at the draft recommendations that we've developed, and we pulled just the kind of headline or top statement about the recommendation into the slide deck so that we could refer to that easily. We have provided additional information in the memo that accompanied the meeting materials, but for the purposes of our review, we'll stick to the headlines. What I'd like to do is get input on any comments or modifications relative to what we do have included as recommendations. Also would love to get any sources of information that would help us strengthen the information about the recommendations. And then I would like to be able to kind of step back and consider, did we miss some recommendations from each of these source documents that we should be considering? And then once we've gone through each of those, then finally step back even further and ask the question if we miss some important recommendations that may fall outside of those source documents that I just mentioned. So that's what I'd like to do. And I am proposing that we just walk through the recommendations kind of section by section, and that commissioners provide input. As I mentioned earlier, we will have a time for public comment at the end of the meeting that could include some questions or comments about the draft recommendations as they appear today. But as I just mentioned, we will be taking comments following this meeting until the 27th. So there's lots of opportunity afterwards to get more information in. So with that, let's go ahead and get to the next slide. One of the things that's a little, could be a little confusing is that we have recommendations that we're making, and then sometimes we refer to the recommendation that is the source of the recommendation we're making in 2024. So for example, on the first slide, our recommendation 1 is pointing us back to a roadmap recommendation 1 with much of the same language. So you'll see that reference, and just to make sure that it doesn't get too confusing, we'll try and make sure we're clear on that as we go through. So in our roadmap, our very first recommendation was to support robust and continuous implementation of the existing climate programs and regulations. And there were 15 programs and regulations that have been adopted at the state level and the federal CAFE standards that we were able to evaluate it as part of the roadmap. And those programs are especially important in helping us meet our 2035 goals by 2035. 2 of those programs were especially important, and one being the Climate Protection Program that DEQ adopted, and House Bill 2021 that deals with the electric sector. And so the first 3 recommendations speak to those 2 programs as the kind of most important programs, with the first being encouraging the Environmental Quality Commission to reestablish a climate mitigation program that maintains the scope and ambition of the 2023 Climate Protection Program rules. As we've discussed at previous meetings, there was a lawsuit, and DEQ is having to go through a second round of rulemaking, and that process is underway, and is expected to wrap up in November. And so this recommendation is just encouraging the EQC to adopt a program that has the same scope and ambition as the program that we had before. The second recommendation was the recommendations B and C under this first overarching recommendations speak to both. The second recommendation speaks to House Bill 2021 and some identified challenges that need to be addressed relative to the maximizing the use of existing grid infrastructure, accelerating new transmission and renewable energy siting, and advancing regional energy markets. And so we wanted to emphasize the need for the legislature to identify and advance programs and policies that might help accelerate those things. And then the other challenge that we had identified, or had been identified to us, was just the capacity challenges at the PUC, both relative to their role in overseeing implementation of House Bill 2021 and the Climate Protection Program. So those 3 recommendations really kind of speak to addressing some of the challenges in terms of being able to meet that roadmap recommendation 1 of supporting robust and continuous implementation. With that, I'll stop for just a minute. And if there are questions or comments about those 3 recommendations, any modifications to the way they're worded, and I don't want us to wordsmith, but just, general sense of any thoughts relative to these 3, happy to take those now.
McDonald.
Yes, thank you.
This is Debbie. And this is really kind of C and D. And I'll admit that I'm new, so I may ask some what might feel like just revisiting stuff that maybe the rest of the commissioners have done for a while. So the one thing that I kind of struggle with when I get to like C and D, and it kind of overlaps with David's presentation, where as a report, I don't know where we get the best bang for the buck in terms of reductions or so, and maybe that's okay for our report, but it does kind of, you know, you could have a lot of money go into heat pumps, you could have a lot of money that goes into the PUCs, but as a legislative report, I guess for legislators, I don't know how they can understand how much is enough, or where is there a sense of a priority of where we would recommend they put the money. So again, that may be revisiting stuff that y'all have talked about, and I apologize.
No,
Chairman,
Director Colbert, I think that's a really good point. And, you know, as I mentioned, we singled out these two programs because of their huge contribution to reducing our overall emissions. I think the second part of your question is just how much detail can we get into relative to what the specifics of the recommendation might be, in terms of how to direct that funding. I would love to get as specific as we can get, but also recognize that we may not be in the best position to answer those questions and characterize that. So thank you for bringing that up, and I would welcome additional information from members of the commission or the public, the directors, on how we might add specificity to B and C and perhaps even D. I see a hand up with someone who's
Chair
on.
McDonald,
Yes.
this is Megan Decker from the PUC. Can you
Great,
hear me?
thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak a little bit to, I really appreciate the Commission's report calling out the importance of implementation oversight and the PUC's role there. The wording of the recommendation makes it perhaps look a little bit like the PUC is sort of seeking something different than what is actually in the legislative concept and the policy option package that we have, that we're socializing right now. Really, the only thing I think is appropriate, and this might help with Dr. Colburn's comment, is if anything, to just acknowledge that implementation of complex policies affects the PUC's staffing needs, and that robust, funding is needed to support oversight of the policy implementation by the utilities. I don't, we don't need to get into a big discussion of how the PUC is funded, but the long and the short of it is there's it's not a general fund ask, and that is the main thing I would want to really clarify here.
Thank you, Chair Decker. And I think it would be great for us to modify this language in a way that you think works best, or we collectively think would work best with the legislative concept that you are advancing. I was not able to find that online, and I may have just not been looking in the right places to be able to make that more specific. But it would be great.
We may not be at that stage yet, and I'd have to have folks follow up with our policy team and Robin Freeman to figure out if it makes sense to call out here. But essentially, it's something that's sort of proceeding on its own, and we'll work with you on language. But I just thought I should speak up and clarify that. Appreciate the call out, but it's not really a request for something that goes beyond sort of our normal staffing needs.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll follow up with you and see if we can come up with better language to kind of reflect what is needed and how to best approach that. Are there any other comments on these first three?
Chair McDonald,
Yes.
this is Alan Zelinka. I just wanted to chime in a little bit in response to Director Colbert's question about bang for the buck. Usually in this type of analysis, like David Alloway did, the marginal abatement cost curves, or MAC curves, are usually the metric for kind of bang for the buck. The width of the bar on the MAC curve that we just saw is how much greenhouse gas emissions it reduces, and either the amount above or below the line is either how much it either costs or how much it saves. So that's the best way to tell what actions have the biggest bang for the buck. So you start with the ones with the lowest marginal abatement cost curve, which is dollars per metric ton saved. And then in a least cost planning world, you'd work your way up and do the ones that cost money last. Hopefully by the time you get there, their technologies made them cheaper. So we did that David did that on several of these analyses here, the 6 of them. We did that in the Tigger analysis for the Tigger actions, but we did not do that on the actions associated with the programs and regulations that we already have adopted, such as Climate Protection Program and HB 2021, or any of the other 15 programs and regulations already adopted. So we don't have that in particular for each of those programs, which would give you a sense of bang for the buck. But what the commission did on the Tigger analysis was recommend that the 6 programs that had the largest amount of savings were the ones that they moved forward as a recommendation. So it's kind of a little bit of a mixed bag of how much information we have to be able to tell about bang for the buck, but it also but we have tried to do that where we could.
Thank you, Alan. That's a helpful clarification. Any other comments on or questions on these 3?
Commissioner Apter has a hand up.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not seeing hands up, so thanks for helping. So Commissioner Apter, and then I see Director Bateman after that.
Donald, just wanted to build on the conversation around the item C recommendation and note, I think it would make sense to specifically call out the Department of Environmental Quality in item C. I think as written, it's a little bit confusing, potentially kind of misconstrues the PUC as the implementer of that program. So I think the same need applies in terms of needing to make sure that we have ample funding available for implementation of that program, but would recommend including DEQ there. And then just one typo, I guess, to flag it should be 2021 Climate Protection Program rules. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Apologies. Director Bateman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add possibly a slightly different flavor to the question that Director Colbert asked a few moments ago about, taking a step back and asking, are these the right or have we prioritized correctly? This is a comment that I've made before, but while many of the pieces that we're looking at here are consumption-based emissions approaches, I think the state already has existing programs of importance that help set the table for these and other actions. And so they're broader and they possibly fall in a slightly different category, but where and how you place infrastructure and features on the land, those are going to have wide sweeping effects and outcomes. So I think it's worth considering here again or adding them to this list. In particular, I'm thinking about the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities program that DLCD partners with ODOT on. And that's where your land use and your transportation systems come together, and how you place those and how those interact do have wide sweeping climate impacts that I'd like to reinsert or put on the table again for consideration. Part of why I really like that program is because the dollars in that program are passed through to our local partners and jurisdictions who actually are the implementers on the ground. And so I think that helps us get to multiple goals at the same time if we can bring a program like that into consideration here. Thank you.
That's great, Director Bateman. And I agree with, personally, I agree with you in terms of adding that. You know, we had limitations on what we could include in the analysis that we did to inform the roadmap. The land use piece, we weren't able to do the modeling on that, but we did definitely note that it's a really important foundational piece, and the partnership between DLCD and ODOT and others to really think about climate friendly and equitable communities is, you know, really an important piece of work. So I look forward to kind of working with you on how to best define that recommendation. And one of the other, I think, overarching messages that we heard that we might want to come back to at more of a global scale was the importance of coming up with funding for local implementing partners. So that might be another topic for us to revisit and think about if there's a broader recommendation that might include some subcategories as well. There are other questions or comments on these?
Yes, Chair McDonald, this is Gabriella Goldfarb with the Oregon Health Authority, and I just wanted to build on Director Colbert's comment and what Alan said, as well as what Director Bateman mentioned, and in retrieving some of the conversation from the roadmap discussion about the fact that the Sustainable Solutions Group study was fantastic and first of its kind, but it was limited in scope and what it could do. And to Director Colbert's point, when we think about a lot of these greenhouse gas reduction efforts that are going to reduce, for example, particle pollution that contribute to heart disease, cardiovascular disease, respiratory conditions, there's actually cost savings that the legislature would realize from health improvements, and those are not captured. So one of the things that we talked about a couple of years ago at that time was the idea of needing, further study to really sharpen that analysis, because the most bang for your buck, again, is not leaving out all the bucks that get affected and that the legislature has to put out. So I guess I would just flag that as a possible. We don't have that study, that information, but that an acknowledgement that there are implications that are not considered, not able to be considered absent, resources to do more refined studies.
Maybe I'll ask Alan to jump in, and there's a lot of work that the Department of Energy and DEQ and many other agencies are doing as part of the development of the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. And part of that will be an update to our TIGR analysis, as well as, I hope, a robust outreach to communities and consideration of all the benefits that will come from these actions. But if you, Alan, if you wouldn't mind just speaking to that a little bit,
Sure.
Relative to the work that's underway, and if there are any needs associated with that work to address some of the issues that Gabriella identified.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McDonald. We did it partially in the TIGR analysis for the TIGR actions, which were above and beyond what would have occurred from CPP and HB 2021 and the other programs and regulations that we already had adopted, those actions to accelerate our goal from 2035 to 2030, we actually did look at the health impacts of those. By reducing the criteria pollutants and using the EPA COBRA model, we were able to estimate that as a health benefit. And interestingly, and which is consistent with previous other studies that have done the same thing, the health benefits exceeded the energy benefits by a pretty good margin, actually. And it wasn't insignificant. It was like $75 billion over through 2050. And so we didn't do that because we didn't cost out the actions that were made up the 15 programs and regulations already adopted. Moving forward into the energy strategy that Odo is doing, we are going to be able to look at those co-benefits in the comparison of our reference scenario to the other types of scenarios that either put constraints on the reference scenario. And we're able to see what happens to the reference case if we don't get the renewables that we want, or if we don't get the EVs that we are planning to get adopted. Those types of constraints that are going to be the scenarios that we'll be looking at. We'll be able to use the COBRA model again to assess what the impact is on health for those particular differences between the reference case and that particular constraint. So we'll be able to hone in a little bit more. And again, the energy strategy's goal isn't to predict the future, but it's to inform policy discussions and recommendations about what should we avoid and what should we promote. And if we're going to get COBRA model results that increase or decrease health benefits, we want to kind of avoid those scenarios. That's what we'll be getting out of the energy strategy work that we're doing. And that will be in the fall. And then we'll be having that conversation about recommendations in the spring.
Yeah, and those benefits have been shown over and over in all kinds of studies, the huge health benefits, but they accrue very broadly. And while those hopefully are persuasive and compelling to legislators, even more so would be dollar figures of what the state needs to pay for these conditions, for example, just to, again, really bring it home to the budget that they are looking at. And the COBRA model is great, and these analyses are really amazing, but they don't give us that, for example. So, just the point of flagging that will maybe draw a connection for our policymakers.
We'll be able to do that, but if you recall, the Tigger model actually does it county by county and builds that up to the state level. And if you'll go back and look at that analysis, what it showed was there was health benefits accruing to every single county in the state. So that was a significant finding as well.
Yeah. If Gabrielle, if you have any way that we can translate the significant health benefits from the COBRA analysis to, what that might save Oregonians relative to support for the Oregon plan, that'd be great to include. And to your point, I think even if we can just flag that as a benefit more specific, as specifically as possible, I think that would do a good service for us.
Yeah, I can follow up with Jeff Crook. Is that the right person? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move to the next part of this first recommendation. So next slide, please. So we also wanted to look for opportunities to advance some of the adoption of programs and incentive programs. And we identified a handful of programs that we thought had lots of demand and a demand that exceeds the funding that those programs currently have, and wanted to highlight those for additional funding to be able to go as far and fast as we can on implementing these programs. I don't know that this is a comprehensive list. Would love to hear from commissioners and agency directors about others that might fall into this category of existing programs that could really use a bigger shot in the arm because the demand is out there for us to implement the programs. So with that, I'll just open it up and see if there are any other programs that should be listed. And again, we will be taking comments for the next 10 days, so we can certainly get information after the meeting, but.
Chair McDonald, this is Nora Apter.
Yes, thank you.
Just wanted to offer one program that is not listed here, but I think would very much fall under the category of very successful and popular, is the Healthy Homes program, which is run through the Oregon Health Authority, that the legislature adopted a couple years ago. I imagine folks are familiar with it, but really focused on helping low-income households in particular and other environmental justice communities make upgrades to their homes to improve air quality and reduce environmental toxins, but also improve energy efficiency. And I understand that, even with the injection of, I think, roughly $2 million through the CPRG grant award, that program is slated to, run out of funding pretty quickly. So I would uplift that here. And then just maybe clarify, I think seems like the DQ electric vehicle rebate programs is intended to be kind of all encompassing, but could be worth considering calling out some of those by name. I'll happy to chat more about it offline, but just noting there's obviously the EV rebate and charge ahead program, but also the medium and heavy duty vehicle rebates and infrastructure grants run by DEQ. And then I know we'll get to National Working Lands. So if others are also had the same thought, I know that that's later in the report. So that's why the National Working Lands Fund is in here. That's correct?
You're right.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Those are two additional or great clarifications and a good additional program. Are there other programs that kind of fit the same description? Okay. Again, we'll take more comments after the meeting, but let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and then come back and we can dive into the natural and working lands and the consumption-based recommendations. Oh, excuse me, we still have one more section of the roadmap recommendations, and then we'll move into the others. So let's go ahead and take a quick 10-minute break and come back and we'll dig back into these recommendations. Thank you. if folks could come off or come show yourself on video when you come back from the break. That way we'll see when we get a critical mass and can start back up again. If folks would turn your video back on when you come back into the meeting, that way we'll know when we can get started. Perfect. Thank you, Abby. Let's go ahead and get restarted. So the second recommendation that we have drafted is also focusing in on recommendation 2 from the roadmap. And as you will recall, in the roadmap, we identified the need to update Oregon's sector-based goals and to include a net zero goal as well. And they were included at one point in legislation during 2023, but in the end did not pass. The sector-based goals were established in 2007. They haven't been updated. We want to make sure that we have updated goals based on the best available science. And so this is a piece of business that needs action and that we would propose to recommend as part of our 2024 biennial report. There is one other component of this recommendation that has been funded and will be underway shortly, and that is to update or create a recommendation for a natural and working land sequestration goal. And because that work is funded and anticipated, we left it off of the recommendation for this report. So love to hear any thoughts about the draft recommendation as it relates to updating the state's greenhouse gas goals. In particular, the sector-based goals. We'll hold and have a separate conversation on the consumption-based goal in the next couple of slides. Any comments on these?
So Chair McDonald, you probably can't see my hand waving, so.
I cannot, thank you.
Specifically around the targets that we plan to set in the future related to, I think as you were describing, the national and working land component. I recall that we had a recommendation, and you'll have to refresh my memory of which report it was in, but around a blue ribbon panel that we would establish. It would help us to determine what the potential was from our national working lands for sequestration rates. I remember in the discussion we had a few years ago, we were grappling with how do we set a target, and I think the conclusion was it would be super helpful to have a blue ribbon panel established to help us dig into that and come up with some rationale behind a set of recommendations that could be supported. So I don't know if this is the right place to bring that up, but it's been on my mind, and I was just curious what anybody else's thoughts may be, or whether it would be appropriate to highlight that in this report.
Thank you, Commissioner Ford. That was one of the recommendations under the Natural and Working Lands proposal. And I suggest we put a pin in that and come back to that at our next, in the next slide. Thank you for raising that. Okay, I don't see any hands. Jeff and Abby, you know, if you do, let me know, or if folks are trying to raise their hand, go ahead and jump in. Okay, thank you. So at this point in time, we did not include any draft recommendations for the other 4 sections of the roadmap. So there were 6 overarching recommendations and a number of subcomponents within those recommendations in the roadmap. Our assessment was that a number of those were either completed, such as the recommendation regarding governance and the capacity of the commission. So that work is funded and underway and completed in some cases. And then we had identified that a couple of the other areas were areas that were likely to be addressed as part of development of the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. So we did not include any of the additional recommendations from the roadmap. There was one kind of general comment that we got in the state agency reports about the need for more coordination to be able to position the state to advance programs in a comprehensive and way, as well as potentially to make sure we can secure additional federal resources, which I think the state's been very successful in doing to date, but there will be a need for ongoing work on that front. There were no specific recommendations relative to what that coordination might need and what it might look like. So I'd welcome any input from the state agencies about what that might look like, either now or, you know, in follow-up to this meeting.
Chair McDonald, just for clarification, you mentioned that there was a recommendation for more coordination. I just was curious kind of where that came from and what was the genesis of that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So we asked state agencies to provide reports, and not every report included that as a recommendation, but it did come up in a number of the reports, both kind of on the Natural and Working Lands Agency side and to some extent on the agencies that are a little more focused on sector-based work. And Jeff, I don't know if you want to add any detail to that. You know,
Yeah, I can
go ahead.
add a few things. just that we asked agencies to provide their climate priorities for the coming years, what their funding needs might be, as well as any recommendations that we should be considering as part of this report that we're working on. We got great input back. There is a summary report that compiles all of that input on our meeting website, so you can check that out. As far as, you know, specifics, I think I don't have a whole lot to add right now. So
That's super helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I imagine it's one of those things that everybody always feels like you could use more coordination. But if there are some specific ideas about what that might look like, that would make a good recommendation, we can have that discussion as follow-up or take input from agencies about that. Let's go to the next slide and turn our attention over to the natural and working lands recommendations. So the natural and working lands recommendations, the proposal that the commission adopted in 2021 included 4 overarching strategies and 11 kind of sub strategies or sub recommendations under one of those that recommended direction to the agencies and funding to be able to advance natural and working land strategies. And we broke that down into land use and making sure, you know, we were maintaining good land use laws and protecting the carbon that we have on the ground today. 2 programs that the Oregon Department of Forestry administers to Department of Agriculture or agricultural strategies, just a host of, and then blue carbon that also is of interest to a number of the agencies. Many of the specific recommendations in the natural and working lands proposal are funded and underway or will be underway with the new capacity that Alan mentioned at the top of the meeting. So that at least the current draft recommendations really focus in on 2 programs that need additional funding that were granted one-time funding. The Natural and Working Lands Fund that was funded in 2023, and funding that was provided to the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. And both of those are getting some of the funds from the Natural and Working Lands Fund, but the Ag Heritage Program also got a separate allocation of funds. Those are, I guess, best described as one-time funds. And ideally, we would have ongoing funding for those programs so that the agencies, as well as technical assistance providers and landowners, can anticipate that there will be funding for certain activities and be able to develop project ideas that would be in line with those. In our Natural and Working Lands proposal, we had a funding recommendation. I believe in that proposal, as well as, well, we did have a funding recommendation in that proposal, as well as in our 2020 report that talked about the importance of that kind of ongoing funding for a variety of activities and the type of funding that could leverage private investments such as green banks. So these are the 2 recommendations that are currently in our draft recommendations. To go back to the point that you made, David, there are 2 programs or 2 call outs from the Natural Working Lands proposal that need action. One was specific to a blue ribbon panel, and that was really designed not specifically to get at what the targets should be, but to think about strategies that we might take to help landowners of all kinds adopt, you know, what can be referred to as climate friendly management practices, and just recognizing the complexity of thinking about landowner decisions and mill infrastructure and all those things together suggested that that really needed the attention of a group of people that could really dig in on that subject. So that's a piece of work that, you know, hasn't had action on it in a comprehensive way. Oregon Department of Forestry has been doing some forecasting of looking at the types of practices that might be beneficial, but the idea of kind of pulling together a group of people who could come up with a set of recommendations that would be good for Oregon forests and our economy and our communities that has not really been started. The other one in the Natural and Working Lands proposal that hasn't been acted upon was the idea of extending the Oregon Ag Heritage Program to include or to allow owners of forest lands, especially small woodlot owners, to participate in that program and the kinds of things that that program is investing in. And that is another one that that hasn't been acted on. On both of those programs, you know, we are going to be standing up a new Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee sometime in the next month to 6 weeks. And I would see that committee as being able to provide some good advice and counsel about those programs. That being said, you know, there may be a step forward that we should be proposing in our biennial report in terms of looking at opportunities for helping forest landowners adopt some of those practices. So certainly, I think it's something we should entertain and consider. Did you have specific thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, well, thank you, Chair McDonald. I mean, so you hit on a number of the key points that I've been thinking about. In particular, the Green Bank. I know what other states are doing in this space, and New York in particular has really upped their game related to using their Green Bank as a mechanism to help support natural and working land investments, which really come through their ability to provide either low-cost financing grants or loan guarantees to really incentivize private investment. So it seems like this is a missed opportunity. You know, you expressed the concern around kind of this one-time $10 million investment by the legislature, and the Green Bank mechanism is at least one pathway that could help us generate a little bit more consistent funding going down the road. So that seems to me that that should be a high priority in my mind, to really focus on getting that established and moving forward. I strongly support, as we're able to. I know there's a lot of. Let me say it this way. There's a lot of interest in the Ag Heritage Program, I think, from the ag community, and you know, tacking forestry, small family forestry on there might be a bit of a challenge, but it won't be as much of a challenge if we're able to increase and sustain a funding level over time. So I think from my perspective, our goal ought to be to expand that agriculture heritage program to include small family forest owners in particular, and in light of and recognition that that expansion is only going to be successful if we're able to generate a more consistent flow of dollars into that program. But I think it can be a really helpful program. So, I mean, those are some of my key thoughts. And you know, back to the blue ribbon. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I guess from my perspective, I still think there's room to do some evaluation around as our knowledge gains and grows around national working lands and forests in particular, the impacts of fire, degradation of carbon associated with fire. I'm dealing with a couple of carbon projects for my clients that have been impacted by wildfire, and I'm trying to understand what the capacity of those forests are in the future, both from the standpoint of the standing dead wood that's out there. How long will that actually be there? I mean, there are lots of questions we haven't answered yet, and I think having a blue ribbon panel to help us understand what the sequestration rates are under various conditions could be helpful, as well as help identify pathways for forest owners to engage quickly and meaningfully in all this work. So those are some of my quick thoughts. So thank you for
Yeah, thank you,
allowing me to.
Commissioner Ford. Other thoughts on the natural and working lands proposals?
Chair McDonald, this is Sarah O'Brien from OWEB. I just wanted to weigh in a little bit on Commissioner Ford's thoughts too. That's a new concept to me, but I'm new to the agency. I think it'd be a really cool thing to bat around with the Ag Heritage Commission and staff. But I really agree with Commissioner Ford. I think what would really be challenging for us to implement would be to create a new program with a new board or commission and give it a couple of limited duration positions and a separate mission and one biennium worth of funding. And so I like the idea of integrating and creating a more sustainable structure. We're looking for ways to do that across our programs and kind of increase sustainability and simplicity for our grantees as well. So really be interested in engaging with that conversation with our folks.
Great, Director O'Brien, thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Senator Dembro.
Oh, thank you.
Hey.
Welcome, Senator Dembro.
Yeah, thank you. I've been on the road and listening, and now I'm actually able to be a participant. So I'm very happy. And you can imagine this is a topic of interest to me, as is the prior one about the emission reduction goals. And one and I very much support both of David's notions of the Green Bank and also a blue ribbon panel. I'm just wondering, just as a kind of aside, what the thinking is about the intersection of this work and the upcoming legislative session, because the session is approaching, and actually bill requests for bills to be pre-session filed are due in about 10 days or so. And so I would be happy to speak with you about getting some bills in. I don't know if any of the agencies are putting in bills on any of these topics, but as you know, I won't be part of this session to actually manage the bills, but I can get the process started.
Thank you for that offer, Senator Dembro. Really appreciate it.
Right.
I will follow up with you.
Great.
This is Brenda Bateman. I've got two thoughts to contribute.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
One, since you're taking recommendations, we would love to have our work or something like it added to the eligibility for the fund, the Natural Working Lands Fund. Specifically, we're working to modernize a farm and forest land use program, and also are working with partners on estuary management planning. So both of those concepts are very important to us, and I think would be a good fit here. But even more importantly, we'd like to offer to serve on your Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee. I think you already have us on your list, but to be a thought partner at the table and put some additional thought around the development of criteria and the allocation of dollars to this work. That's important to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bateman. And you, your agency was really helpful in adoption of the Natural and Working Lands proposal back in 2021 and the design of that. And I think really made some important contributions to blue carbon opportunities on the coast. So really appreciated the involvement from your team during that process. Then the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee is going to be made up of citizens, but one of the changes for this next process is to do a better job of engaging the agencies and advisory committee members a little more seamlessly. When we had the previous advisory committee, the technical committees were kind of kept somewhat separate, and some of the state agencies were involved in those, others weren't. As I mentioned, I think your agency was very involved and supportive of some of that work. But our intent is to make sure that we've got the agencies at the table that can really help inform some of the conversations that the advisory committee members will be having. So, and hopeful that with the addition of the two staff positions, we'll be able to make that as easy on your agencies as possible. So appreciate that. I did note an interest in expanding the eligibility for the Natural and Working Lands Fund. And so that's something that the commission can consider. Thank you. Other comments on this?
This is Commissioner Reitman, and I'd just like to comment that we had a particularly active fire season this year, and so there's been a lot of discussion about how trying to put out fires is a very inefficient allocation of resources, and everybody has an idea about what we should have done to mitigate fire or make the fire less catastrophic. And you know, I think it's something we really need to look at. Like, for example, we've changed the way we farm. We used to plow and have bare ground, and now we don't, which is better for the soil, but also there's not a barrier to stop fires like we used to have. And so I don't know, I just think that that we could somehow take some of that firefighting budget and use it to manage our natural and working lands, that there's a lot of money there to be reallocated.
Thank you for that recommendation. There has been significant funding, and I know there's still efforts underway to look for more and more stable funding on an ongoing basis. We're very interested in talking with you and getting additional thoughts on how we might consider including a wildfire prevention program as part of our recommendation. So thank you, Commissioner Reitman. Other comments on the natural and working lands piece? Well, now we can turn to conversation and circle back to the consumption-based recommendations. So if you go to the next slide. As we heard from David earlier in our meeting, there were 3 broad recommendations that DEQ included. We pulled some of this language from information that we heard in August, and now that the reports are out, I think we probably will want to kind of cross-check this language with the way DEQ might have provided it in the final reports. There were 2 recommendations in high-level recommendations in the DEQ report that we could consider making a little more explicit. The first one being the goal that we might, or target we might want to set for reducing Oregon's consumption-based emissions. And on this one, we've left that in this draft version, left that out as a specific description of the recommendation because we hadn't really been able to dig through the report and the technical appendices to that report. But I think it would be worth it for us to consider if we have enough information today to make that more explicit. Similarly, on the last recommendation, recommendation 7, the DEQ report generally said it should be done more frequently. In this draft, we included a recommendation for updating that report every 2 years and doing that in such a way that it would be in sync with our biennial report to the legislature. So that we were able to kind of provide a little more specifics on that. And then the recommendation 6 was included in DEQ's report, and we kind of customized it a little bit to think with the thought that some of these actions, some of these sector areas or consumption-based areas might be the focus of legislative attention in the coming session. And so we may want to focus in on these. They also happen to be some of the areas of biggest opportunity. So that's a little bit of background on the framing of the 3 recommendations. And take any comments about these, and then I might want to circle back to you, David, to ask you a few questions. Any questions or comments on these 3? We had a committee that participated in the development of the report from DEQ. Are there any comments from members of that committee about your experience with the consumption-based emissions report and reflections on the importance and opportunity associated with it?
Chair McDonald, this is Nora Apter. I'm happy to
Thank
check
you.
in. I first just want to appreciate again all of DEQ's work, and I think hopefully David's presentations throughout the last few meetings have helped bring folks along on this issue. I think it is just so important that the state is looking at this, the current gaps in addressing consumption-based emissions, and I hope that folks can continue to review and digest all of the hugely helpful and informative information in the report. And specific to the recommendations, I in particular want to appreciate the call out for targeted actions related to transportation, the built environment, and food waste. I think particularly the first 2, we know that there have been ongoing conversations in the legislature and state agencies around how we can reduce sector-based emissions and improve, equity and affordability in these sectors, and just really appreciate the complementary actions that the report highlights that I think will hopefully be timely as policy conversations continue around those sectors. And I think food waste as well, and really all 3 of these with the recent injection of funding from the CPRG also give us a good opportunity and kind of launch pad to think about where we can just help support continued progress in these areas and try to follow through with some of these recommendations. So just again, want to appreciate David and the team for all of the great work.
Thank you, Commissioner Apter. And Tom, I see you have your hand up, and you were on the committee, despite that you had stepped down from the commission. So I really appreciate the added service you gave us this spring and summer, and would love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, I just want to agree with Commissioner Apter about the work that DEQ has done and David's presentations. Those are just excellent. But to emphasize too that, this consumption-based emission approach is really going to be necessary coming into the future. Because we're going to finally have collaboration regionally, nationally, internationally on fighting global emissions. And Oregon is going to be at the forefront of having the knowledge and the experience of doing these consumption-based emissions. And I guess everyone's going to eventually going to have to buy in and do this. And I think it's great that Oregon is sort of on the forefront of doing it.
Thank you, Tom. Commissioner Jackson. Oh, you are on mute.
There we go. I do want to echo the support for the recommendation and Commissioner Apter's comments. I also want to say that I was able to go and read the technical report that really supports this recommendation, and just really appreciated the way the identification and evaluation of the abatement options was well put together. So this recommendation really supports all the technical background. It really shows the opportunity that we have to really be a leader in this consumption-based inventory space. So the great work that DEQ did and our consultants, David, you did an outstanding job at really breaking out the complicated work that I saw in the analysis here in a way that we're able to understand it. And when you get into analysis, it gets a little complicated, but I feel that the way it was all laid out really shows the measurable differences that we can make. And it really, I think, brings a way of laying it out in a comprehensive way. So I really do appreciate the way that this report's laid out, and I feel this recommendation reflects that. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Other comments? David, I wanted to ask you, one, if you thought it's reasonable for us to suggest updating the inventory every 2 years. And then the second question has to do with whether or not you would be able to work with some of the commissioners to consider the different approaches to setting a specific goal for our consumption-based emissions reduction, and determine if we have enough information and to be able to put something more specific into the recommendation.
Yeah, Chair McCollum, thank you. To your first question, could DEQ update the consumption-based emissions inventory every 2 years? I believe that we can. The effort required to update the inventory in terms of number of person hours is actually considerably lower than the effort that DEQ puts into updating the sector-based inventory. It requires much less than 1 FTE. The difference is that the sector-based inventory has dedicated staff and the consumption-based inventory does not. And so those of us who can update the consumption-based emissions inventory, well, frankly, sometimes we get pulled away by other agency or legislative priorities. It might be helpful to have dedicated like direction or position authority to have dedicated staff to do this, but I believe barring some major new disruption to our program, we should be able to update this every 2 years. Again, I can't commit resources, but I'm optimistic that we should probably be able to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And to your second question, could we work with some members of the commission to fine-tune the language around a goal? Yes, I believe we could do that. I think the information in the SEI discussion paper that I highlighted gives us probably all the information we need. I would also observe that your draft proposed goals for the sector-based inventory, if they were expanded in scope and applied to consumption-based emissions, would be exceptionally very, very consistent with all four of the frameworks that SEI identified in the literature. So I think that might be a very rich area to explore, and specifically the idea that perhaps the state of Oregon could have a dashboard of goals related to greenhouse gas emissions, just like the state uses a dashboard of metrics for every other endeavor of state government of comparable complexity, whether it's achieving healthcare outcomes, or achieving educational outcomes, or achieving economic outcomes. Even just one little department like the DEQ, we have a series of performance goals that show up in a dashboard, because there is no one singular data point that can capture all of the work and complexity. So I would be happy to engage with some commission members on some specific possible language around goals. And I will extend that offer if you want to doodle deeper on recommendation 6. What are those targeted actions involving transportation to build environment and food waste? I think in the technical report, identifies a large number of options, and if the commission is interested, we could support an effort to dive deeper into those and get a little bit more specific.
That would be great. I think we would really appreciate it. As you heard, you have lots of support from the members of the committee that participated in the development of the proposal, and so I think that would be a great opportunity. So appreciate that. Any other specific comments on these 3 recommendations before we turn to kind of what's missing at a broader scale? Okay, hearing none. So the last piece that I wanted to do on these recommendations was to, encourage people to step back and think about what might be missing from the recommendations. And Director Bateman mentioned one in the existing programs related to consideration of the climate friendly and equitable communities program. I also, as I was thinking about these recommendations before the meeting, wondered about whether we had really put enough in relative to transportation, knowing that it's going to be a very big opportunity. We don't pass transportation packages very often. There may be a similarity with some of the opportunities with the built environment. But beyond just thinking about it from a consumption-based standpoint, are there some additional things that we should be recommending relative to sector emissions around transportation and the built environment? And then the other area that I think we're a little light on potentially is adaptation. The commission is charged with thinking about and making recommendations on adaptation to climate change. The DLCD has been doing some great work along with many partner agencies to think about and develop a framework for adaptation for the state and to consider how the state might support communities in implementing appropriate adaptation strategies based on local circumstances and issues. So those are the 2 areas that came to mind for me in terms of places where we might want to get additional input and additional ideas. Happy to open it up for other thoughts from commissioners.
Kathy, I would just mention from an agricultural perspective, I think adaptation is really important. you know, in terms of cropping, in terms of providing local food processing opportunities, local food access for more resilience in local communities. And then I would say also just thinking about how we maintain the agricultural economy across the state, because it supports so many of those rural local communities. You know, when you go south and east in Oregon, we've done a few grant programs. I mean, they're mentioned in our report, the Resilient Food Systems. We have the State Meat Inspection Program now that's providing more local meat processing capacity, which was a lesson learned from 2020. And then I think looking forward, you know, thinking about how we promote climate smart ag practices in Oregon. And I think those all fall into adaptation.
That's great. I look forward to following up with you and framing out some ideas for consideration by the commission. Thank you. Other areas that commissioners want to flag for consideration?
Chair McDonald, this is Nora Apter. I appreciate you calling out the transportation sector, just given, as you noted, that will be a major topic of conversation over the coming months and into next session. And I don't know if we want to have a longer conversation about that now in terms of where we might supplement and just add specificity to the recommendations there, but does seem very important, recognizing it is still, you know, the top contributor to our sector-based emissions in the state, and a lot of opportunities to advance equity and economic justice goals as well. So happy to, start brainstorming now, or maybe have a separate conversation. But I agree that that seems important. And then more generally, I know the current draft includes kind of the status of the high-level roadmap recommendations, but does not include some of the specific additional actions from the roadmap in terms of the additional policies to achieve our state's emissions reduction goals. So it could be worth kind of reflecting on those and thinking about what makes sense to uplift here based on kind of status and ongoing other state priorities.
Thank you, Nora. I had intended to make a comment. Appendix B in the memo that's posted online does have just a high level assessment of whether the action is needed, whether it's underway or complete, and a very short statement about that. There certainly may be many other many places where we might want to pull up some of those, especially that are either need action or are underway, but maybe facing challenges. And then I think, you know, the other place, and maybe this is more specifically what you were referring to, but what we have referred to as the TIGR actions, the actions that go above and beyond the existing programs that would help us accelerate reaching our 2035 climate goals. We may want to focus some additional attention there. So definitely want to welcome input from commissioners, but also from the public about places where we might be advancing that. I assume some of the work on that latter part is happening through the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. Perhaps at our next meeting, we can have a little more detail about the work plan for the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan and how it might sync up with what we call the TIGR actions and actions that might be needed as part of that. So that might be a helpful backdrop to some of our discussion to hopefully elevate and finalize our recommendations. Nora, if you have any kind of high level areas around transportation that you want to just flag to help other commissioners think about some of the other things that could be included relative to transportation, you know, feel free to do that now. Otherwise, I think we could have we should have a deeper conversation and maybe pull a couple of commissioners in to help us think about that, as well as the agencies.
Chair McDonald, oh, so sorry.
No, go ahead. Director Colbert.
So I can't help myself because you did talk about adaptation. And so I know that it's hard to know the boundary conditions, like, you know, we're focused on greenhouse gas emission reductions, like, but thinking about adaptation, just for me, and I don't know that this is the place for it in terms of the report, but just kind of building on what my colleague from Ag mentioned is just the kind of relationship of adaptation, resiliency, our working lands. I have a really hard time distinguishing all of that in terms of the big picture. And so I don't know where we go, but I just put a plug in for continuing to think about adaptation and resiliency in the context of the work of the commission. So for what it's worth.
Yeah, thank you, Director Colbert. It has been something that we've touched on now and then during our discussions, but not as much as I think is anticipated in the directions that we have and duties that we have in statute. And so staff at Odo and I had got some recommendations about ways that we might better facilitate conversations and keep it more top of our agendas, or at least equal to our agendas going forward. So definitely interested in that and would welcome any thoughts you might have on how to best do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me just echo, you know, what Debbie just said. I think there is a lot of legislative interest in adaptation and resiliency, and that's a resource that we don't want to forget. But I want to go back to the transportation issue. Actually, as so often happens, Nora said exactly what I was going to say. That is just the need for some urgency here because of what we know will be an all-absorbing debate during the upcoming session. The Joint Committee on Transportation is just next week going to finish its public hearings. You know, it's been traveling around the state. And it's going to break itself up into different subcommittees that are going to be looking at different aspects of what needs to go into a transportation package. And I think that they could really use the advice of this commission in those matters. And I would also add that where they could use some help would be on those initiatives that, rather than lowering emissions, could actually result in raising emissions. I mean, we're really focused on emission reduction, but I think we also need to focus on preventing the raising of emissions, the increasing of emissions. And I think some advice, I think we can all imagine certain, you know, kinds of actions that could lead to that. And so what kinds of advice could we give that really would foreground emission reduction as the, you know, the legislature is looking at different options? So I think there's some urgency here, and I think, you know, it's a conversation for this commission to really dig into in the next few months.
Thank you, Senator Dembro. Really excellent point. So if I'll give a minute or so more for people to make other comments about the current draft recommendations, but also wanted to have members of the public start to let Abby know if you are interested in providing testimony so that we can start that queue. So please raise your hand to let her know that you'd like to present testimony. Any final comments or additional areas that we should be doing some investigation on? Okay. Thank you. Let's go ahead and maybe take the slide deck down and then we can take public comment.
Sorry, Chair McDonald, maybe just one thought, because I don't think this has come up too much, is just if there might be additional recommendations that we consider uplifting around leveraging federal funding, which, I think on the heels of the incredible CPRG award, right, just kind of underscores the importance of continued proactive state policy and funding action to make us competitive. So again, happy to talk through what that might look like offline, but I do think that's important to continue to highlight.
That's a great point. Thank you, Commissioner Apter. Abby, do we have a queue of people who want to give testimony?
Currently, I'm not seeing any hands raised or any comments in the chat.
Okay. As well. Folks, just another 30 seconds to identify themselves if they want. Well, seeing none, we can go to next steps. So as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, our next meeting is October 15th. We have a public comment period that will stay open until noon on September 27th. We would welcome input from agencies and from the public and commissioners, especially where you can make specific recommendations regarding modification of our recommendations, additions of new recommendations, and specific sources of information that might help strengthen our recommendations. So that would be ideal. And then at that October meeting, we would walk through all of the recommendations again with language as close to the language we might want to see in the final report, recognizing that we're kind of approaching the report in two sections. There may be places where some of the information that we may identify in a recommendation might have been covered prior or vice versa. So there may be a little bit of modification that will make sense just from an editing perspective, but hopefully we'll be able to look at a slate of recommendations as we have in the past for our biennial reports, and then ideally adopt those recommendations at our upcoming meeting. So September 27th at noon, I'd love to get as many comments as we can. The committee that considered and provided some input to staff and myself will meet again. We'll try and synthesize the information we get, and we will get a updated draft set of recommendations posted as early as we can, and that will guide our discussions in October. Jeff, am I leaving anything out?
I think you summarized it well.
Great. Well, with that, I will bring the September 17th, 2024 meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission to a close. And thank you all for your participation and great input on the recommendations today. And thank you also to our presenters.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank
Good
you
to
all.
see everybody.
Thanks, Kathy.